Hello everyone, my name is Rachel. Welcome back to my channel. So today I am here to bring you guys some addictive and fast-paced books that will get you out of a reading slump, or you'll just have a really fun time with these books. I got this idea initially from Jess from Peace Love Books, so I'm gonna link her video down below. She focused on romance novels, but I want to give you guys a sampling of like every genre that I read, just to kind of give you a starting point of different kinds of books to try if you find yourself in a reading slump, or you just want to read something fast-paced like I said. So these are going to be pretty rapid fire recommendations because I've talked about all of these books in the past. And yeah, let's just go ahead and get into these recommendations. So first genre I want to talk a little bit about is manga and comics. I have recently become obsessed with these genres, especially in the last couple of weeks. There are two YouTubers that I would highly recommend checking out though for more recommendations, because like I said, I'm only just now getting into these genres. So that would be Ashley from Bookish Realm and Shay from Shay Geeks Out. I will of course link them down below. But I did want to give you guys a few recommendations here. First we have Fence. This is a YA comic series that centers around a fencing team at a private boarding school. And so there's just a lot of amazing characters. There's great humor. The art style is stunning. It is so beautiful. This series truly has something for everyone because there's inklings of romances, there's rivalries, there's obviously a lot of fencing involved, and it's really cool because even if you know nothing about fencing, this comic series educates you about it. And yeah, like I've read volumes 1 and 2, absolutely obsessed with both of them, and I cannot wait to continue on. Next up we have Way of the House Husband. So this is a manga series that is a slice of life series that centers around Tatsu, who was known as the Immortal Dragon, and he used to be a boss in the Yakuza. He left that life behind to become a house husband and to marry his wife Miku. And so this is just an absurd and over-the-top comedy. We basically see Tatsu in all of these different house husband situations, and the humor really comes from how seriously he takes his role as a house husband. He's a very endearing character. This is just such a fun time. You will fly through volumes of this because usually it takes me like probably over an hour to read a volume of manga, whereas with this series I can blow through an entire volume in like 30 minutes. Also, there is an anime adaptation on Netflix and I've been having a really fun time watching that. Next up we have Sweat and Soap by Kintetsu Yamada. This is my new ultimate manga obsession. This is the sweetest and cutest and most tender romance like ever, like that I've ever read, honestly, truly. Has a weird premise though. We have Asako and Kotaro. They both work for this soap company, and Asako has this issue where she sweats a lot. She's very self-conscious about that and the way that she smells, but Kotaro is obsessed with the way that she smells. And so that's how their relationship starts, but it obviously becomes so much more than that, and it's absolutely everything. Parts of this manga have made me cry. That's how obsessed I am with this couple. So next up I have some YA recommendations that I think are just paced really well, really fun reads. This first one is not technically a YA book, but I feel like it reads very much like YA in a lot of ways. But this is The House in the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune. Literally my favorite book of all time, arguably. Like, I adore this book with my heart and soul. This essentially centers around Linus, who works for the department in charge of magical youth. He's a caseworker, and so he's sent to this house on the Cerulean Sea that houses these like 6 magical children, and he's there to make sure that the children are being treated well by their caretaker Arthur. What ensues is a really beautiful romance, first of all, between Arthur and Linus, but also these 6 children are everything. They must be protected at all costs. TJ Klune can do like no wrong in my eyes. Pretty much everything I've read by him is like one of my favorite things I've ever read. So this is my top recommendation by him for sure. Next up, getting into some like actual YA books, we have Long Way Down by Jason Reynolds. This is a book that is told in verse, so you can see there's not a ton of text going on, so you will definitely fly through this book. But this book also has quite the emotional impact. This one is about Will, whose older brother Sean has been shot. So now Will is dead set on revenge against the people that shot and killed his brother, and so he goes to the elevator in his apartment complex, and he has, I believe, 7 floors to go down before he gets to the ground floor and he can enact his revenge. But on each floor, the door opens to the elevator and basically a ghost of someone from his life steps in and has a conversation with him. This is beautiful, stunning, amazing, groundbreaking, like that Lady Gaga meme. Like, this is everything. It's truly, truly incredible. There's a reason it's won all of these awards. If you haven't read this yet, like, what are you doing with your life? Next up, to change things up a bit, we have a paranormal romancy YA series that is Vampire Academy, and I also highly, highly, highly recommend the Bloodline series, which is the spin-off to this one. These books, you guys, are so addictive. Like, literally some of the best vampire-centered books that I've ever read. I didn't expect to love these books as much as I did because these came out around like 2007, so I thought that they would be like really dated and maybe kind of cringy, but they're really not. I feel like both of these series definitely hold up against the test of time. Yeah, like, you can't help but just get invested in these characters and the storyline and the academy itself and the world that this is set in. Like, it's such a fun time. Highly recommended if you've never read this series before. Next up, we have another book told in verse. That is The Poet X by Elizabeth Acevedo. Elizabeth Acevedo is literally one of the best young adult authors out there. I will say that with my whole chest. Once again, there's a reason that this book has won so many awards, but this is another book that is told in verse. By the way, you can see like all of my tabs because I tabbed the hecky darn out of this book when I reread it for the first time. So this is about Siamata. She's 16 years old, I believe, and this centers around her life. There's a lot about like questioning her religion in this, and she eventually joins her school's slam poetry club, and it's just absolutely fantastic. Still the best thing that I've read by Elizabeth Acevedo so far. Incredible. What can I say? Next up, we're gonna get into the sci-fi realm here. I have to recommend Skyward by Brandon Sanderson. Yes, this is a YA series, but I also feel like even if you're someone who doesn't like YA anymore, I still think you'd really enjoy this series. It's just a quality sci-fi series that centers around Spencer, our main character. She wants to be a fighter pilot. This takes place on a different planet, but her father was also a fighter pilot, but he was killed in action because he just out of nowhere deserted his team, and so they had no choice but to take him down for that. So that definitely gets in the way of her dreams of being a fighter pilot, and this is just amazingly paced. Amazing characters, amazing world building. I mean, yeah, like, what else can I say? I've only read book 1, but it was literally one of my like top 3 favorite books that I read last year. Next up, sticking with sci-fi, we have the Illuminati Files by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff. So this is a YA science fiction series that is told in a multimedia format. I'll just kind of flip some pages for you guys to see kind of what we have going on. But this first book is about, it's the year 2575, and 2 rival mega corporations are at war over a planet that's little more than an ice-covered speck. Now, with enemy fire raining down on them, exes Katie and Ezra, who are barely even talking to each other, are forced to escape on the evacuating fleet. And so things go on from there. There's also like an AI that's involved that may or may not be kind of a villain, maybe? We don't know. This is also a series that I feel like has something for everyone. There's romances going on in all 3 of the books in this series. You know, lots of action, lots of suspense. There's even horror elements, especially in book 2, which is Gemina. There were definitely some horror elements going on. Yeah, like, I need to reread this series soon. That's how incredible this is. Like, you will fly through, even though this book is really thick, like, you will fly fly through a book in probably just a couple of hours, just because of like the multimedia aspect. It really keeps you on the edge of your seat. So good. I have just a couple more YA recommendations. First of all, we have Wolf by Wolf by Ryan Groudon. This is book 1 in a duology. There's also a novella that you would read after this book and before the second book. But this is told in an alternate reality where the Axis powers won World War II. And so there's this motorcycle race that happens every year where Japanese and German teenagers can participate in this race. This is like the most insane motorcycle race ever because it starts in Berlin and it loops down into Africa, through Asia, and then up all the way to Tokyo, Japan. Like absolutely bonkers. Our main character is Yael, who is Jewish. She was in a concentration camp. She was experimented upon with this serum and now she can shapeshift to look like pretty much any woman, basically. And so she uses those abilities to shapeshift into one of the racers, and her goal is to win the race so she can get close enough to Hitler to assassinate him herself. This, oh my god, you guys, this first book in particular, the pacing is incredible because you just can't help but get invested in Yael's story, and the race itself, like, it's just crazy. It feels very cinematic in parts. The novella was also really fantastic, and the second book was also really great as well, though that one definitely is a bit slower paced, but like this first book, you guys, is just like chef's kiss amazing in my mind. And then my last YA recommendation has to be the Diviner series by Libba Bray. So this is a science fiction paranormal YA series that just has the most amazing cast of characters. This takes place in the 1920s in New York City. Our pretty major character is Evie O'Neill. She has the ability to read objects. Like if she picks up an object, she like has visions and can like tell things about that object's past, like who its past owners were and like things like that. There's some really great romances in this series as well. This book, not gonna lie, gets pretty scary. I mean, the whole series gets kind of scary at some points, but I feel like this first book in particular is pretty creepy because it has to do with a murder mystery, and there is this ghost on the loose that is killing people in really sadistic ways. So know that going in. The audiobooks, by the way, are top notch for this series. Literally some of the best audiobooks I have ever listened to. Cannot recommend them highly enough. So that's it for all of my YA recommendations. Let's skip on over to some thrillers. So my top thriller recommendation would be The Passengers by John Marrs. This is literally one of the most fast-paced books you will ever read. It's basically about this group of random people that are all passengers in all of these different like self-driving cars. Someone hacks into all of these cars and reroutes their path so that all these cars will collide in 2 hours. And so what ensues is just this like heart-racing story about how like the hacker is trying to get all these people to reveal their secrets before he kills them, basically. Like, it's absolutely insane, but so well done. John Marrs is probably one of the best thriller authors that I've ever read from. I would also highly recommend The One, also by John Marrs. This one is about this dating service that uses your DNA to find your literal perfect match, your soulmate. And there's like 5 POVs, I think, that we follow in that book. And that one is insane as well. Like, John Marrs is like the king of plot twists. Like, every chapter ends in a plot twist. They're also very short chapters, so you just can't help but like move on to the next chapter, and before you know it, you've read the whole book. Another really suspenseful thriller is No Exit. I can't remember the author, but it'll be over here. I want to say it's Taylor Adams. That could be completely wrong, but this is about our main character who, she has no choice but to stop at a rest stop because it's snowing really hard. But as she's walking into the rest stop from her car, she sees this unmarked van that has a cage with a little girl inside. And so now she's hell-bent on getting this girl out and rescuing her. And so there's just a really interesting cast of characters that are also in the rest stop. And so you're trying to guess, along with our main character, you know, who among these people has this little girl in their van. There is an adaptation of this book. They made a movie of it. It's on Hulu. I have not watched it yet, but I definitely want to because I'm really interested to see what they did with the original source material. So next up, I have a couple of recommendations for horror novels. The first one, this might be kind of basic, but I have to go with Bird Box by Josh Malerman. This is one of the best paced horror novels that I've ever read. Like, a lot of horror novels, at least the ones that I've read, start out kind of slow. Whereas this one, I feel like from the get-go, you are on the edge of your seat. You are terrified. Like, it's just a really well done story. There is a sequel to this as well called Mallory that I personally really loved, but I don't think a lot of people did. I might be in the minority of that. Of course, there is the Netflix adaptation, but that movie is quite a bit different from the story of the original book. So I would definitely still recommend reading this even if you've watched the movie. And then my other horror recommendation would be My Best Friend's Exorcism by Grady Hendrix. So as you can tell from the cover, this takes place in the 1980s. It very much reads like you're watching an 80s horror film, basically. It feels very cinematic, but we have Abby and Gretchen who have been best friends since the 4th grade. That's another aspect of this story that I really love, is their friendship. You don't read a ton of like truly healthy female friendships, especially in like horror novels, you know, things like this, but I feel like the friendship was just done really well. So as you can probably tell from the title, basically Gretchen gets possessed by a demon, and so Abby is just doing everything she can to save her best friend. Highly recommend this one. Like I said, it reads like a movie, so it's very well paced in my opinion. So let us get into some romance recommendations. I want to start with some novellas that I really love. First of all, I have the Men at Work series by Tiffany Rice. These are Harlequin Desire books, I believe, and I went into this series thinking that these were just gonna be like cheesy romances because they're Harlequin, and they're amazing. I've read other things by Tiffany Rice, like her original Sinner series, but this series as a whole remains some of my like absolute favorites by her because they're just really great romances with great steamy scenes. They're really short audiobooks. I believe all of them are like 5 hours long. You will fly through them. Just a really fun time. They do center around the holidays. Like the first one is about Halloween. The second one is Thanksgiving centered, and then the third one is centered around Christmas. And yeah, they're just really, really fun. Next up, I can't do a video about getting out of a reading slump without talking about the Planet Barbarians series by Ruby Dixon. This is truly the series I turn to whenever I feel like I'm getting into a slump. These are just really short and sweet science fiction alien romances. I'm sure most of you have heard of this series at this point because it blew up on TikTok. But the basic premise is that there are a group of human women who get kidnapped by these bad aliens to be sold into slavery, but their ship ends up crash landing on this ice planet, and so yeah, it's just romances with blue alien dudes. These are very short books. They're usually around 200 pages or like 6-hour audiobooks. You will absolutely fly through them. Next up, we have The Headmaster, another Tiffany Rice book. This is another really short audiobook, just about 5 hours long. This is a gothic romance that centers around our main character, who I believe she gets into a car accident, and she ends up getting a job at this the local boarding school, and so it's a romance between her and the headmaster of the school. All I will say is that the plot goes into a very interesting direction. Highly recommend that. Next up, I have to bring up Jessica Kane novellas. Like, come on, even though she's become deranged and unhinged at this point, like, I have not read any of her recent releases. However, I adore her older releases. First one I have to recommend is Hefty. This is about Zach and Jill. They are seniors in high school, and Zach plays for the football team. Jill is on the cheerleading squad, and it's just a really, really sweet childhood friends to lovers romance going on. Really beautiful. My top recommendation from Jessica Kane, because it's probably the sweetest romance that she's ever written. I would also highly recommend Breaking the Bully by Jessica Kane. This one is also a new adult romance. They are seniors in high school as well. The basic premise is that the hero and heroine had a connection when they were 16, but the heroine has an abusive father that kind of got in the way of them being together, and so she had to start ignoring the hero, and so to get her attention, he starts bullying her, but once he realizes what's actually going on, he does the most groveling ever, and it's just chef's kiss. incredible. Another novella author that I have to bring up is Cassie Mint. We all know that I am the biggest Cassie Mint stan. The first one I would recommend is Mountain Captive. This is about our hero who kidnaps our heroine when she's hiking through the woods because he's trying to get back at her father, who I believe is like a business rival or something, and then he realizes that she hates her father, and so they end up falling for each other. It's a fun time. My camera battery just died, so I had to change that out. That's why the angle might have changed. But to move on with my Cassie Mint recommendations, I have to go with Thin Ice. This is definitely one of my top favorite novellas from her. This one is about a figure skater. She's part of a pairs team in particular, and it's a romance between her and her coach, who is like this grumpy Scottish hot dude. The thing with Cassie Mint is that her novellas are just the perfect amount of short and sweet and sexy romances. Like, they will give you that boost of serotonin that you need, you know? Last but not least for Cassie Mint, I have to recommend Big Bet. It's one of my favorite novellas of all time. This is just a very, very sweet, mutual pining, friends to lovers romance that takes place at a Las Vegas casino. The hero is a blackjack dealer. The heroine is a burlesque dancer. Fantastic. And then I have to recommend That Time I Got Drunk and Saved a Demon by Kimberly Lemming. This is a fantastic comedic fantasy romance novella, and it also has a very cozy vibe to it. It basically centers around our heroine, Cinnamon Hot Pepper, and it's her romance with this demon named Fallon, and she ends up going on this quest with Fallon and falling in love with him along the way. So funny. Really great romance as well. So now let's get into some full-length romance novellas. My top recommendation, especially for historical romance, has to be The Duchess Deal by Tessa Dare. This is like a 7-hour audiobook. You will absolutely fly through it. And Ash is like the ultimate hilarious, grumpy hero. He's amazing, and I love how Emma gets under his skin. This is a marriage of convenience story, kind of a Beauty and the Beast retelling in case you don't know. And it's literally my favorite historical romance of all time. I talk about this book all the time. I need to stop. Next, I would highly recommend A Daring Pursuit by Kate Bateman. This is technically book 2 in her Ruthless Rival series, but you can read this as a standalone. This is an enemies with benefits situation about Karis and Tristan, and I vividly remember when I was reading this book that it like took so much effort for me to actually put it down. I could have easily read this in one sitting. I thought the pacing was immaculate. This is easily the steamiest romance that I've read by Kate Bateman. By the way, this is by no means like a comprehensive list. I absolutely could have brought up way more books than this, but I don't need this video to be an hour long. So that's why I'm trying to restrain myself with the amount of books that I recommend. But for some more like paranormal type recommendations, I would highly recommend the Hidden Legacy series by Ilona Andrews. This is the best urban fantasy romance series I've ever read. Granted, I haven't read very many of those, but like these books are immaculately paced. They're so fast paced. The romance is phenomenal. I've only read the first 3 books, but the romance in these 3 books is amazing. The characters are really fun. The magic system is really interesting. Like, what's not to love about this series? It truly is amazing in every way. I have to bring up Learn My Lesson by Katie Roberts. This is book 2 in her Wicked Villain series, which is a series that centers around Disney movie retellings where the villain gets the girl, essentially. And so this one is a poly romance between Hades, Meg, and Hercules. This was the first book that I read in this series, and I was blown away by this story, these characters. Like, I was just mesmerized the whole time. This is a pretty short book as well. Like, I believe it's just, yeah, it's like a little over like 200 pages or so. The audiobook, you'll fly through it. Like, it's just such a good time. Yes, the plots of these books are kind of ridiculous, but like that's the vibe that I want from this kind of retelling, you know? Then for some more darker romance recommendations, I would recommend the Born in Blood Mafia Chronicles series by Cora Riley. These books are so fast-paced. There's never a dull moment. I've read the first 4 books of this series so far. So if you're in the mood for a mafia romance, I would definitely recommend going with this one. They are just overall a fun time. I think my personal favorite book of this series is still Bound by Duty, which is Dante and Valentina's story, though, like I said, I've truly enjoyed all 4 of the books that I've read so far. And then last but certainly not least, we made it to my last recommendation. I have to recommend the Necessary Evil series by Onley James. I've read the first 2 books of this series so far, and they just keep getting better and better. I absolutely adored Unhinged, but I loved Psycho even more. But if you don't know anything about this series, this centers around these 7 adopted brothers who are all psychopaths, and they have been raised to be vigilante serial killers, essentially. They kill people that have done terrible, awful things that have fallen through the cracks of the justice system. And so far, these are all MM romances. I believe the entire series is MM, if I'm not mistaken. Onley James just perfectly wrote these books because somehow these are sweet and wholesome and sexy romances, but we are centering around serial killers at the end of the day. So like, you do see them kill people. Like, it's crazy how she balanced all of these different elements. There's also a fantastic found family aspect to this as well because of these 7 adopted brothers and the man who raised them. I just finished Psycho last night, and yeah, my obsession with these characters knows no bounds. So that is going to be it for all of my recommendations for fast-paced and addictive books to help get you out of a reading slump, or just books that you can have fun with. I would love it if you would leave a comment down below if you want to leave even more recommendations for myself and for the people that are watching. I would also love it if you would leave a like and subscribe, and I thank you so much in advance if you do. And with all of that being said, I will see you guys in the next video. Bye!